Now, some of the things I'll show you now are probably, I mean, they're so ho-hum, they're sort of silly, but they're part of, they're not silly, I don't think, but they're part of the KISS principle. So I use email quite a lot. Now, all of you would use email, and I'm not suggesting I'm the only person doing it. But I send regular updates about once a month to everyone that's in the program. And it's basically, you know, just, it's usually no more than a single screen, and it's simply, you know, that this has to be done, you know, if you don't withdraw by the 31st of March, then you're going to have to pay, and, you know, so on and so forth, and do you know that this is on, and do you know that that's on? And the feedback from that is quite significant. And while I don't have quantitative data, the amount of queries that I have to deal with and the number of people that don't achieve deadlines, I just don't have to deal with them very much. And so whilst this might take a little bit of work, the actual downstream effect is actually quite significant. Now, some people would say that's not e-learning. And it's not e-learning, but it's student support. And so it does affect the student experience, and on that basis it seems reasonable. So I also send occasional reminders for particular courses, and so this is simply a reminder that there's a seminar on a certain date. All right? Now, these are adults. One would expect that they would put these things in their diary, but you and I all know that we are just as guilty of not turning up in place. So to send one of these 24 hours before, it takes me 2 minutes. And again, it makes a big difference. The other thing that I do with email, apart from obviously, well, maybe not so obviously, because some people won't do it, accepting assignments and so on by email, I also send all of my assignment reports back by email. Now, we have a small course. We don't have 1,500 people or 2,000 people in it, so I can do this. And the positive response from a course experience point of view is absolutely massive. You know, they get the responses quickly. I often get emails back saying, thanks for sending me that, it's great. And so what I hope it deals with is that constant complaint that students talk about, which is that they don't get enough feedback. And I don't think that it's actually about quantity of feedback. I think it's about timeliness. It's about the quality of the service. Yeah, and I don't know how you would do it with the really big courses, but they're just ideas. And I don't have to deal with the downstream effects of people complaining because they didn't get their stuff back. Because I also put in those emails that we'll hold on to it for a period of 6 weeks, at which time it'll be disposed of. I also keep a personal blog. I find it a really useful exercise for me because it's basically my diary of interesting things. And so the way that it contributes to teaching is that when I come around next time to a particular course, I'll go back to the blog and think, what have I looked at? What do I need to think about in terms of updating? And to me, that's a really useful thing. And I know that some students look at it, but most of them don't. This is a group blog from a student project. I'm just not using discussion forums anymore. Some people do, and that's fine. I just find discussion forums very difficult to manage with all the threads and stuff. I just find it all it's time consuming in order to keep it clean. Whereas the blogs, you know, because they're linear, which is their disadvantage, the blog is easy to manage. I've used the blogs in different ways. I've used them with group-based blogs where individual team members are expected to contribute, and you know it's used to assess as part of the formal assessment if they're doing a group-based project. In some courses we use them simply for people to keep journals. And of course, one of the real problems is if someone's got the blog site, then anyone can see it. And so the people I'm dealing with need to know that if they wouldn't put it in on the front page of the newspaper, they don't put it on here. I would love RMIT to have a blog site that I could use behind a firewall, but there isn't one. And so I've got no, you know, I mean, this works perfectly well. It's beautiful. Where I use group blogs, I make sure that they're time limited, try to keep them to 3 to 4 weeks, because I found that actually works really well. If you set, you know, if I put it over the semester, the activity just dies off. It's a real problem. Sometimes I moderate it. In this case, it was not moderated at all. I did go in and have a look at it once a week to make sure there was nothing inappropriate. But basically I said, look, this is for you as a communication tool if you want to use it. And some groups use it and some groups don't, up to them. In other cases, I use it and moderate it. So it's pretty much similar to a discussion forum, just on a slightly different tangent. Clearly, and we would all use e-learning, you know, various search mechanisms of one sort or another. whether it's at the library, and often I think we forget that we use searches at the library more than what we, and clearly there are things like Wikipedia and Google, and there are also the dedicated databases depending on what particular discipline you're in. Now, there's nothing very exciting about all of those things, and it seems to me that we underestimate what we actually do, and it doesn't get measured because it's not the flashy stuff. It's the really ordinary. And I've done another paper elsewhere which I title "The Ordinary is Extraordinary." You know, it's the normal, and so it gets missed. Clearly, podcasting has been, the use of audio. If I stick away from podcasting for it, the use of audio is been an important conversation in the last 18 months to 2 years. And I mean, I think it's got huge potential, but I think we're still playing with it. And I think the potential is overrated as well. There's a really nice paper which I haven't put on the reference, but a fellow that teaches English in Japan, and but all of the Japanese students were given an iPod as part of their enrolment, and basically, you know, they download music and listen to music. And he walked into a class one day and said to one student who clearly used his iPod, something like "iPod, therefore I learn." He said, "No, iPod, therefore I listen to music." And there's this sort of assumption if something's popular for personal use that it will work in education. Well, certainly I haven't used podcasts, again, because there's no podcasting service that I can use through RMIT, otherwise I would. I still think we're trying to sort out what podcasts are useful for it. But podcasting, something that's 3 to 5 minutes and very specific and sort of hitting out, the sort of radio type of approach might work. I've certainly used audio casts where I'll record stuff in audio and send it to students directly, particularly where I've been trying to convey something which is actually difficult to write down, but you can convey in a few words. You know how sometimes you can say something pretty quickly, but if you try to write it down, it all gets really complicated. The only problem is the file sizes, basically. The other use of audio clearly is, you know, in terms of free stuff, is something like Skype that I've been using with some master's students at a distance, and I'm sure that you have as well. Skype not just is sort of two-way audio, but also for audio-visual stuff as well if they've got the bandwidth. And of course you can do conference calls. I think it's up to 5. So it's worth thinking about. Audio-visual presentations, things like Photo Story and Windows Movie Maker, I use them to make 2 to 3 minute audio-visual presentations for students. Of also getting them often, instead of them doing their own presentations, say at the end of the semester, which I'm actually, when I've got a number of presentations, I'm getting them to put audio-visual presentations together. And I found that a really successful strategy, because what it means, if I say to them, you can do a 2 to 3 minute presentation, they do a 2 to 3 minute presentation. Whereas if you say to them you can talk about it for 10 minutes, it sort of all goes sort of pear-shaped. So what I've been encouraging them to do is to put an audio-visual presentation together for, say, 3 minutes, and then to ask questions and discussion, and that's worked really, really well. Yeah, as an assessment tool. And finally, I'm also using virtual classroom software, synchronous virtual classroom software, and that's sort of come a long way in the last 18 months. And I think it's asynchronous rather than asynchronous, and it's got some disadvantages, but it seems to be very much at the point where if you can get your organisation to open the firewalls and do all of those things, it has a very strong potential for that immediate interaction if you can facilitate it in a reasonable way.